Hi, everybody. My name is Nitika Chopra, and I am the founder and CEO of Chronicon and the Chronicon Foundation. And I am so excited to be here with you all today. When I first heard about this amazing summit, I knew that it would be filled with folks watching that are dealing with autoimmune disease, loving someone with autoimmune disease, and that it's probably something that is very close to all of your hearts. So that is something that we already have in common. And talking about this and sharing my story and helping you and supporting you and sharing yours is something that I am so passionate about. So I really hope that our time together today will be supportive and that you will feel like you really have an understanding of how to tell your story in a way that's truly authentic to you. And I wanted to start out our conversation today and our time together just sharing a bit about my story. I didn't always feel comfortable sharing my story. And I think sometimes when we see people online or we see people, on social media and things, we can think, oh, this must come like so easy to this person. But you'll see as I tell you a little bit about my journey that I resisted sharing my story for years and years and years. So if anyone is sitting at home watching this and thinking to themselves, I don't know if I'm ever going to have the courage to share my story. I don't know if I'm ever going to feel empowered to share it. I don't know if the people in my life are going to support me through it. All of those fears that might come up for you. If you're thinking about that right now, I just want you to know you're so not alone, not even a little bit. And my hope and my intention is that through our time together, I'll be able to walk you through some things that you can do that are tangible, some processes that you can practice and walk yourself through after this conversation that we're going to have, and things that you can carry throughout your entire career and into your entire world so that you can take this at your own pace. So one of the reasons why I am so excited to be here today is because I was diagnosed with my first autoimmune disease when I was just 10 years old. And oh gosh, I say that line often when I'm sharing my story, and it still makes me emotional to think of that little girl at 10 years old who was innocent, totally innocent, and didn't know what autoimmune conditions were, didn't even know that that was a word. And I remember exactly what I was wearing. I was, a little chubby in these little denim shorts and like a little tank top. And I was getting ready to probably like go play with friends and hang out for the summer. And I ended up finding a tiny spot of dry skin on my left arm. And I remember calling my mom into the bathroom and saying, Mom, like, what is this? Like, it keeps itching. I don't know what this is. And she had had a mild form of eczema throughout her life that, a simple cream was able to help with her specific case of eczema. So we kind of thought, oh, it's probably just eczema. We can probably put a little cream on it and it'll be fine. But obviously, as moms do, she was like, let's take you to the doctor and check it out and make sure. And what we realized shortly after that, after getting a biopsy, was that I actually had the autoimmune disease known as psoriasis. And again, we had never heard of that before. And when I think of that time in my life, I think about just how much everything turned upside down after getting that diagnosis, how my life was honestly never the same again after that day. And in lots of really beautiful ways and in lots of really heartbreaking ways. So within a year of getting diagnosed with psoriasis, I ended up having it from the tip of my foot to the tip of my head. What started as a dime-sized spot on my left arm took over my entire body. And things like playing soccer or going to the beach with ease and having fun with friends or doing sleepovers, that was all just kind of taken away pretty quickly because I was severely itching my skin every day, all day. and sometimes so much in the middle of the night that I would bleed through my sheets and my mom would have to change them in the morning before I went to school. It was traumatic and it was really heartbreaking. And it was also so much bigger than my 10-year-old, 15-year-old, eventually 20-year-old self even could fully understand. And it led me to eventually, about 9 years later, I got psoriatic arthritis. And the things that were happening to my skin started to happen to my joints. And my joints started to get deformed. And my doctor told me that if I didn't get on a medication or get on a really severe treatment, or aggressive treatment, I should say, I would be completely immobile by the time I was 30. And so all of this was happening. And my experience at the time was really like it was happening to me. I felt very overwhelmed by it. I felt very exhausted by it. And I didn't see any silver linings, or I didn't feel empowered or, motivated in some magnificent way that I could put in a memoir and tell you I had it all figured out. I did not. I was starting this journey, just barely going through puberty and then going into my teens and my early 20s. And it really, really rocked me on every level. And so the thought of sharing my story, if I had told that version of myself that I would be talking at the Autoimmune Association Summit and being the opening keynote and sharing this with all of you, she would have probably laughed and never believed it, because that thought never entered my mind. I was brought up in a culture where I'm Indian, and I was definitely brought up in a culture where my family thought, don't make anyone uncomfortable. Don't talk about anything too much. Don't put too much focus on it. It was one of those conversations that was really about, how can we make others more comfortable? And how can we make sure that we just don't draw too much negative attention to ourselves? And I know that this came from a good place. I know that this came from a place of wanting to protect me and wanting to make sure that people didn't tease me, which they did anyway, or, put me in a box, or just think of me as my disease, which they also did anyway. But it really, really taught me that I wasn't supposed to share my story, that it's much healthier, much safer, and the right thing to do to be demure, be mindful, really think of it as something that you just don't talk about. So that's why when I decided to become an entrepreneur with my first company, and this was a few years after my health had gotten better, I started an online magazine called Bella Life, and I really loved it. And it eventually led to me having my own talk show on global television. I still didn't really talk about my health, which, as I was preparing to talk to you all today, it was kind of that is sort of wild, because it was such a huge part of my life, but I kind of put it in a neat little box in the corner. So if I was talking about an eye cream, sure, I would say that I grew up with dry skin, but I didn't go into the pain or the trauma or the heartache or the devastation. I really wanted it to be real neat and real tidy. That didn't last, obviously, because now I share everything super fully. But for a long time, I felt like that was the only way that I could share my story. I felt like no one really wanted to know the truth about what I had been through. And I also had my own fears, perhaps because of how I was raised, but also because I didn't want to over-identify with my illness. And I know so many people out there talk about this, it's such a fine line, and it's so nuanced to have a condition that really dictated every single thing about my life. And really, from putting on socks to the shower that I was about to take to the foods that I eat, every single thing of my life was dictated by disease. And yet I really wanted to live beyond it. I didn't want to be known as a sick person for the rest of my life. And I felt like if I shared my story, I personally didn't know how to share it from a more empowered place. I only knew how to share it initially from a much more disempowered place, a place that felt like I was wearing the trauma. And that wasn't what I wanted. So I resisted it for a long time. And then after a while, I started to really own that I was more committed to helping others than I was committed to staying small. And that was a huge turning point for me. I think I started to feel like there was this emptiness in not fully going there for me. I didn't feel fulfilled. I didn't feel like I was doing a lot of fun things and I was sharing, content that I believed in, but I wasn't fully being authentic and I wasn't fully owning my story. So today, I really want to help all of you understand how can you own your story. Listening to the journey that I went on, you know that it has not been a straight and narrow path. And I'll share more about the different ways that I've gotten to where I am in terms of sharing my story. But I really wanted to start there because if you're sitting at home watching this and thinking, oh, it's so easy for this person, or like they do this all the time, they don't have any nervousness around it, and that is sort of getting you in your head and having you think that, you maybe aren't cut out for this, I just want you to work on quieting that part of your mind and know that in the next several minutes, we're going to go through a handful of really tangible things that you can do to own your story and own it in the way that is authentic to you. So I shared how I owned my story and parts of how I owned my story and the journey that it took to get there. But I was really excited to share it in a public way. I felt like I was meant to, do that and kind of go beyond what I did with Bella Life and do something in the same line of media, but maybe with a different audience. But not everybody has to share their story that way. And I really want you to know, even if when I'm explaining some of these things that are coming up, even if it is more geared towards people who are in the public eye, I just want you to know, take what you feel resonates from that. And if you help one person, if your goal is to share your story so that your family has more compassion when you go to the holidays with them this year, or if your goal is to support the person that you're working with who you feel like is really struggling and maybe sharing your story with them could help, but you don't know how, there is no act in sharing your story and wanting to make an impact with people that is too small. And I really, really believe that. And I personally have found that the more I focus on those small moments and those really, really tangible moments where I'm just one-on-one with someone, it really shows me and reminds me why I'm doing this in the first place. So that's the first thing that I really want to focus on with all of you is the why. The process of me understanding my why and sharing my story genuinely took years. And it doesn't have to take that long for you. I think there are a lot more people who are giving great examples of how to do this and how to own your story in a way that, will maybe motivate you and start you off in a great way. But I didn't really have that when I started sharing my story. I didn't see other people who were talking about chronic illness. So I felt like I was really starting from scratch. And learning about my why was such a pivotal thing for me. And it's probably the greatest foundational tool that I have as I navigate the conversations that I'm having every day through the work that I'm doing at Chronicon. So when I talk about figuring out your why, I want you to really think about why you want to tell your story. And in terms of, is it about impact or is it about visibility? And that can be an edgy crossroads for some people because we live in a world that is so focused on visibility. I mean, I get it. When I was younger, I wanted my talk show. I wanted to be in front of people, and I still do that for a living. But I think when I was younger, I was driven by the visibility more, and now I am so much more driven by the impact. But I had to sit down and really take myself to task in that conversation. And I say it's an edgy conversation because sometimes I saw parts of myself, especially this was like years ago when I first started having these conversations with myself, where I was like, oh God, like you really want that validation. You really want someone to show you that you are as strong as you know you are, or that the story that you went through was as heart-wrenching and harrowing as it was. And I had to get to a place within myself where I could really put that down and put it on a shelf somewhere and say, okay, if that's the reason, if that ends up happening, great, fine. I will know that the story that I'm telling is meant to reach those people. But that can't be the reason why I am doing it, because it's not sustainable. And I think that is something people don't talk about nearly enough in this day and age of quick, clickbaity, fast algorithm, constantly trying to figure out the algorithm, all that kind of stuff. And I sort of think about it as the same thing as like healthy, nourishing foods versus empty calories. I don't know if this is going to resonate with you, but that's what worked for me, where I feel like, when I eat the meal that is nourishing, it has all the food groups, that is still delicious, but, I make sure that I'm really taking care of my body through that meal. I feel a sense of sustenance. I feel a sense of like, oh, this is really nourishing me on such a deep level. And then I can go out and like live my life and have my full day. And I'm not kind of dragging my feet and feeling like, oh, I'm getting depleted really quickly. Versus when I just have pizza, gluten-free, obviously, but still just have pizza. And I love pizza. Pizza brings me a lot of joy. Pizza brings me pleasure. It's like also a fun thing to eat with friends. Like there is fun with pizza, okay? No one is denying that there isn't, or whatever your food of choice is. But it does not sustain me. If I have some pizza, I'm probably going to be hungry like soon after. I'm going to feel like I'm not quite satisfied in all the ways that my body needs me to be satisfied. And I won't probably feel like I can go through a whole day and just kind of go and be my fullest, best self. I'll probably maybe get a little bloated, like just feel a little off. So that's the way I think about it. And I hope you're still with me, but that's the way I think about it when I think about, the difference between having a conversation that really focuses on the visibility that you're trying to get versus having a conversation about the impact. And I'm spending quite a bit of time on this one point on purpose, because I really have found that in all the twists and turns that I have made with Bella Life and now with Chronicon, and we have the Chronicon Foundation, I have had to go back to, why are you doing this? What is the purpose? If I'm getting all worked up because the outcome wasn't more visibility, but I realized that it was a lot of impact, it changes everything for me. It really allows me to deepen into service and focus on that impact that I've been so committed to making from the beginning. So I want you to spend time, like a good amount of time, thinking about that, and do that in the way that feels best to you. You can journal about it. You can talk to friends about it. I am a very spiritual person, so I spend a lot of time quietly thinking about these things. And then the next thing that I really want you to focus on is the who. Who are you going to be having this conversation with? And, you can do this in different ways. For me, what's really resonated with me when I think about the audience and the person that I want to be talking to is I start to think about that 10-year-old version of me. I start to think about how she was in so much pain and she felt so lost. And even though half the population of the United States is chronically ill, she felt like she was the only person on the planet. And I don't ever want anyone to feel like they are less than or like they are the only ones, because it's just a problem that could be avoided if I shared my story more and if all of you shared your story more. Right? So that's really connected to my why, and also connected to the who. I think about her. I think about the 10-year-old version of me who got sick and how she would be as an adult and what she might be going through and the challenges she might have on a first date, or when she's going after that job she really wants, or when she needs a lot of energy to move into her dream home and she doesn't know if she can do it. All of those things. And I work on connecting with her And that has been such a game changer for me. And again, it's one of those foundational pieces that I come back to over and over and over again. And then I really want you to focus on, as our last piece, the how. The how. And I get really excited about this. I'm a generator in human design, if that means anything to any of you. And so I love the action part. I love getting into action. And even from, a nervous system perspective, if any of you are geeking out on our nervous systems these days, it's really helpful when your mind can't totally understand something yet to just get into action. And I like to think of it as like gentle action. It doesn't have to be aggressive. It doesn't have to be major. Just get into action. So one of the first things that I do when I'm starting anything new is I do my research. And for me, I research through people the best. I love stories, right? So I'll go through and look at who are the people that when I see what they're talking about, and sometimes it's not chronic illness related, it can be even like fashion or beauty related, but just the way that they're telling their stories and that they're sharing with their audiences really resonates with me. And I start to notice that. And then the next part of that is I start to connect with, how do I want to tell my story? What is my unique way of sharing my message with the world? For some people, when they give a keynote, they are loud. They are really, maybe a little bit more intense with it. They have slides. Like, I don't know, they could be doing all kinds of things. That's not me. I need to get into a heart-centered place. I need to make sure that I'm connecting with the impact that I want to make. And I work on that in every piece of content that I share. So I think about that because even when it comes to the who I'm connecting with, that we talked about already, of like that person out there, it also matters when connecting with brands and partners if that's something that you're interested in. So when you're focusing on how you want to do it, figuring out which your unique way of doing this, of sharing your story is going to be the thing that allows you to get connected to the brands that you really want, and also allows you to have brand partnerships that don't feel like such a struggle. Because I know a lot of people have felt that when working with brands, it can feel like an uphill battle, or you're like always trying to make sure that you are on the same page, things like that. I really haven't experienced that in many years because I stay really true to how I am going to be sharing my story, how I am going to be engaging with the content that I create. So the more that you figure that out, do that research and hone in on your own unique perspective and way of sharing, it's going to really, really help you. And then also, I think the last piece I really want to let you know about is finding small ways that you can gently start to share your story. So I did this initially before I started Chronicon. I was like, does anyone even want me to talk about chronic illness? Like, I have no idea. No one's talking about it. So I would practice sharing bits and pieces and different bits and pieces whenever I would meet someone. So for example, if I met one of you today, I might share that I have an autoimmune disease, or I might share that I have a skin disease, or that I have a arthritis disease, or I might share that I'm an advocate. I would sort of pull out different parts of my story with each person that I met, and it would end up giving me feedback. I'd start to see, oh, well, that person like really shut down when I shared that thing. But then this person thought it was really interesting, and they told me about their cousin who also has an autoimmune disease, and that was really fun. So I start to kind of it's more research actually, like research that way through people, through conversations, but in a way that doesn't feel super scary or intimidating. And some people think it's easier to do this with people you don't know at all. And other people feel it's easier to do it with people you know really care about you and you can be really safe with. So those are a couple of things that I really suggest on starting with the how. And then you can start to figure out where in your life you're already having big conversations and how you can add this part of your story into those conversations. I did that before I started Chronicon. I had a talk on self-love, and I had never really shared about my chronic illness journey. And I decided to put my chronic illness story into the self-love talk that I was already giving. And it changed everything for me because I got so many questions from people in the audience afterwards that were all chronic illness related. And I had never experienced that before. And it also deepened my just commitment to wanting to help this audience more and more and more. So I hope that was really helpful. I think out of everything I shared today, if you can just take one thing from what I talked to you about, I really want you to know that this is about figuring out your unique way of doing this. This is not about Nitika's way of doing it. It's not about, your favorite Instagrammer's way of doing it. Take what you like from the different people that you see out there, but no, this is about your way of doing it. And if that means that you share it with one person, if that means that you share it with 100,000 people, it's great. Just focusing on your impact and your why is going to change everything for you. And you got this. I hope you know that. And thank you so much for being here with me today.